Fargo, Spring Breakers,
Cloud Atlas,
Hotel Transylvania,
Silver Linings Playbook.
It just feels like a real film festival for the community.
It's very exciting for me to be here to support a film.
I wanted to show Toronto the way I experience it.
We want people to like our movies and understand them.
What makes it really special for me is the fact that the audiences have responded the way they have.
If I got lucky in the first two, this was the lottery.
I feel like I hit the jackpot. I mean, I can't believe that I'm sitting at a table, you know, flanked by these people.
Every producer I've ever worked with is in that character. And a couple I invented.
You have to be faithful to what they really were.
But I certainly wouldn't, you know, deign to think that we are godfathering anything.
I do.
And that's why he's got the beard.
The first nice thing the press have ever done.
I was really happy to find out this is where we were coming.
I said, I'm in.
The festival of the people who live here.
That was amazing. Flash photography is not permitted, and please. Our moderator for this afternoon's session is Jesse Wente, and it's now my pleasure to welcome our representatives from the First Peoples Cinema. Thank you.
Please welcome up a woman who needs no introduction, of course, Alanisa Bomsawin. Sarah Spillane, actually we'll go Hunter next. Hunter's the star of Around the Block. Sarah Spillane is the director. Jeff Barnaby, director of Rhymes of Young Ghouls with his star Glenn Gould. We've got Peter Stebbings, of course, director of Empire of Dirt, along with one of his stars and producers, Jennifer Podemsky. And then just at the end there, Jack Thompson, executive producer of Around the Block. So exciting. Before we get started, I just want to first acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of New Credit, the original inhabitants of this land, for welcoming us on their traditional territories. It's a great pleasure, and I think very much in keeping with the history of this land, which has always been a meeting place of nations, that we have such an international panel of First Peoples filmmakers with us today. Well, where should we begin?
Over there.
Over there? Well, let's start with Around the Block, Sarah or Jack. Or can you speak to how the project came about in the first place?
Sure, yeah. I wrote the first draft of this script about, gosh, be coming up to almost 10 years now. I was living in a city in Sydney called Redfern, which is a predominantly Indigenous neighbourhood in just south of the city, and I was teaching at an Aboriginal arts college and was really interested in this concept of personal freedom, of existentialism, and my students and my friends at the time, predominantly Indigenous students, seemed to be about as far away from this concept as I could imagine. So really the inspiration, I guess, or the catalyst for this story was trying to truthfully examine this concept. You know, are we as individuals free?
Sarah came to me at the Gama Festival, which is the largest Indigenous cultural festival in Australia, where I am the only non-Indigenous member of the Gama Council. And it's been going now for about 13 years. This year we celebrated the 50th anniversary of what's called the Bark Petition, a petition taken by the Indigenous people to the federal government in Canberra. And Sarah and I met there. We had already worked together on a couple of short movies, proof of concept pictures, and she showed me the script, and I said, this picture has to be made. And so we went down the long road of trying to get it made. Eventually, Sarah came to Los Angeles and met with a couple of Australian producers there in Los Angeles, Brian and Sue, and they managed to get the money together behind the picture, and here we are.
Excellent. Jeff, you want to speak to how Rhymes for Young Ghouls came together?
That's my son, by the way.
I think he's asking the first question.
Yeah. It wouldn't be a native press conference if some didn't bring a baby.
So that portion of the press conference has been met. We got approached by the CFC to write a screenplay, which I promptly did. The screenplay came about pretty fast, and the CFC submitted it to TFI, the Tribeca Film Institute. It won the Creative Promise Award there. It beat out something like 700 other screenplays from North America, and from that point on, we went to the traditional funding agencies in Canada, Telefilm, Lissadec, and we've had a great repertoire with them over the years with my shorts. They were able to kind of put in money towards the colony and a few other things that I had done. So we had already established quite a good relationship with them. So from that point on, it was just a matter of just trying to raise enough money to get the picture off the ground, which we didn't. We didn't, but we went ahead anyway, and it got made, and by some miracle, it got finished. It just finished 2 weeks ago, and I was just telling people in the other press conference I had a couple of weeks to see what my kid looked like, and and jump on a plane here, or not even train. We came by train. So I haven't even seen the film yet. That gives you an idea of how fast we finished it. I haven't even seen it. I haven't even seen a finished product yet. I was doing the music when we were finishing the color timing. So I have heard the final soundtrack, and I have witnessed the final image, but I have yet to see both of them together. So I'm excited. I'm just excited as everybody else, or I assume that the film is screening here at TIFF, the biggest and best festival in the world. And I hope everybody enjoys it. The public screenings are Monday the 9th, right? And again on Tuesday. Check your schedules for the time.
And Jen, you want to talk about how Empire of Dirt came about?
Wow. Yeah, I too had this project for 8 years now. Shannon Masters, the writer, brought it to me 8 years ago when I sort of branched out on my own as a producer. Fell in love with the characters. It was a very different film at the time, and we basically developed it for a few years, and then we continued to develop it. She is a graduate of the CFC's writers program, and we were lucky enough to be brought into the CFC for the feature film program, and we were there for like 3 years, I think, developing. We love development. It was great, great time. We got to a point where the movie was just too big it was all-consuming and too big to make for the budget, and ironically, when we parted ways and Peter Stebbings actually started to back up, Peter Stebbings came on board probably a year into the process at the CFC. We started developing it together again, and by the time we got to the place where we were going to be shooting, we decided that it was just too big for us to do for the budget we had. So we applied for some more money, didn't get it, decided that we would just give it some more time. So we gave it another year and made it for a quarter of the money that we originally had. It is really, truly a labor of love to breathe life into these characters in this story, and I just really can't believe that we're sitting here today. It was a very small team who made this happen, and a lot of love around us from everyone who helped us develop it from the beginning, and especially to Peter, who is a great visionary and nurtured us all very well.
Alanis, can you talk a bit about Hi Ho, Mr. Hay?
Yes, this is a film that I started to make almost 3 years ago. And I was in the community, Karawapiskat, and while I was making this film, there was the crisis about housing. So I put this film aside, and I felt that I had to do something about the situation, which I did this film that came out last year. Then I went back to what I had begun to do concerning the school and the also you get to meet people, the everyday life of the people in the community. And the heart of the story is really about Shannon, this young girl that really started a campaign to get a proper school for the community. And she wasn't getting too much help through government agencies and Indian Affairs and all that. And she had the great idea to go to children. And she started to go and talk to children, other children of all nations in the classroom. And it's unbelievable because it was awful because she died in a car accident when she was 15. And then the children in Canada really continue, and well, they won the battle because the school is being built. And for me, children are always the most important aspect of life and education. So you get to see children from many different nationalities that are walking for this all across Canada. And it's pretty great to see what they accomplish. And what's very moving is to see children from all walks of life that takes on a responsibility such as that. Thank you.
It strikes me that you've all really made movies about young people, education, the importance of that is. This is clearly a pressing issue for Indigenous people all over the world. Can you talk a bit about the motivations of that, or even Hunter, of your own experience?
Well, most definitely. Well, my experience being an Indigenous person, I kind of had the best of both worlds. My mother's from New York and my father's Aboriginal, so one moment I'm in the bush and then the next moment I'm in a big city. But the communities down there, you know, especially with children, it's definitely a big struggle because they just don't have the support. And now it's not about race anymore. It's more about family, and it's more black on black now compared to black on white, and it's multicultural. Exactly what you said, and I think the main thing about it really is, yeah, that the struggle that I really experienced in school was that it's this stereotype, and no one really understands it except you. But yeah, and it's definitely within the schools, and it's an issue that a lot of people address to the point where you kind of just want to be like Morgan Freeman and say, why are we talking about it? Yeah.
Anyone else? Glenn, do you want to talk a bit about, I mean, it does strike me that there is a commonality among the movies in terms of the protagonists, the characters, the issues. They all seem to be speaking to many of the same issues. Thoughts, Glenn?
Well, it's, you know, growing up, I grew up in a First Nations community that was right in the city limits. So we went to school in the city, but you know, where I grew up was, there was a lot of racism. You know, unfortunately, I didn't finish school and ended up dropping out, you know, and it was because of dealing with, like our friend here says, you know, you're treated a little different in that school system, so you don't always have the confidence. You could be the brightest bulb in the room, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to walk out of there with honors because you're challenged with that, you know, that constant thing of having to fit in or having to keep up with the race, you know. So it's yeah, I think, you know, equal education and the support networks that aren't there. I think it's a struggle for First Nations children all over Turtle Island, all over the globe, I think, or for all walks of life, even, like he says, you know, just for young people in general these days, they're also stereotyped, just as young people, you know, the kids with hoodies, you know, the kids with the pants hanging down, they're all gangsters, And it's that culture of, you know, right now what I see is, even in our own communities and on the res, young Native kids trying to be gangsters, and then they get stereotyped as gangsters, and it's all walks of life. So we look at these kids on the street, and we judge them automatically by their appearance, you know. We don't know anything about them. We just assume that they're gangsters, right? So, but, yeah.
And is there a particular, for the directors, you know, a motivation to explore these specific stories about the young people? Is that sort of what drives these stories out into the public?
I don't know. I don't quite remember deliberately thinking to myself, I need to make this about young people. I think it just it kind of transpired that way. If there was any conscious effort there, it was probably more for the curb appeal than the actual content of the story. Personally, I dropped out of high school too, and I was blessed in that my mom is actually she has a master's in education, so you know I was pretty well educated by the time I got to high school, and I thought being in this kind of environment. First of all, let me just say high schools and school in general, pretty much across North America, suck ass. I mean, they're horrible across the board. They're horrible for white people, for black people, for red people. If you imported somebody from Andromeda, I'm pretty sure it would suck for them too. So I don't think it's an issue completely isolated to Indigenous people. I think it lands on them harder, particularly because of the social stratification that's already there. It just exacerbates what's already an issue. So education, I mean, how do you define that? How do you define that? I can tell you right now, if it came down to it and the lights went out tomorrow, I would rather have the guy that has a second grade education that knows how to skin a moose than a guy that has a PhD and, you know, knows how to operate a particle accelerator, because a particle accelerator is going to do you no good when there's no electricity. So there's a preconceived notion of what education actually is, and it's just like, all right, you need to know your math and English and history, but how does that actually pertain to Indigenous cultures and the knowledge that they bring to the table? You're starting to see a bit of a kind of a gear change, a gear shift. For instance, Al Gore, who's this billionaire, goes around lecturing people about how to take care of the environment. So it takes non-Native people a good 20,000 years to reach that point where Native people have been this whole time. So they need all this education to get there, whereas Indigenous people were there in the first place. So who is more educated? We know how to take care of the environment. You do not. So who is more educated? And the idea that we do not flourish in these daycares for big kids is a testament to the idea of what we know, not what we don't know.
Mark Twain said, "I never let my schooling get in the way of my education." And I believe that a number of the issues are about that kind of education. What is it that provides you with what you need to know about life, just to make your own life a worthwhile experience, just to embrace it? And I think that that's close to the heart of the theme of our picture. When we were putting this picture together and presenting the script for people's interest, I remember Sarah coming to me and saying, there's an element in this picture in which the group of Indigenous children, high school kids, not really children, young adults, are present a performance of Hamlet. And a number of people took a look at the script and said, I like it, but how are these Aboriginal kids ever going to do Hamlet? It's an extraordinary question to ask. Think about it. It's an extraordinary question to ask. And it's indicative of that kind of stereotyping that we're talking about. First of all, kids from an underprivileged group, whether it's about poverty or whether it's about race. It's still an attitude about these people won't be able to do it. Only highly educated, rich people can appreciate Hamlet or play Hamlet, this timeless piece of drama that actually is pertinent for anyone, anywhere.
And I'll just add to that, I have to say, during the casting process, there is a number of, and this is taking that gangster stereotype on a fashion sense and putting that in a positive, that a lot of young Indigenous kids have really taken to hip-hop and, you know, a lot of the African-American rap culture. And we had a number of young actors come in and audition, and some musicians, and we had a guy who has ended up playing a supporting role in the film, but he's head to toe covered in tattoos, and there was some sort of mix-up, and he ended up auditioning for the central character Liam, played by Hunter. And he came in, and we realised this mix-up, and one of the audition pieces was to be or not to be. And this guy, who I kid you not, I'd be scared to meet in a dark alley by myself, this enormous, covered in tattoos, 20-something-year-old guy who word perfect recites to be or not to be. And I was blown away, and I just said to him at the end, like, dude, please come back and audition for the right role, but, like, how did you do that? And he's like, yo, it's hip-hop, you know, Shakespeare, it's hip-hop.
Yeah, there's no difference between iambic pentameter and you know, Jay-Z. It's all the rhythm of the words, and it's a testament to the classism that nobody can seem to make that synonymous. I mean, it's not in my opinion, they are synonymous, and it's not I don't know what the word is, but I look to Shakespeare as much as I look to NWA for when I'm writing. And I think you start seeing that crossover a little bit in shows like, say, Deadwood, where it's fuck this and fuck that. And at the same time, there's a kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a grasp of the language that really stems all the way back to Shakespeare. And Shakespeare loved to swear, man. I mean, anybody who knows Shakespeare knows that he was kind of, you know, he was kind of lewd, and he had some pretty racy things to say. He did it in a really affluent, kind of uppity way, but he still did it. And I think it's, you know, it's a lost resource that people aren't using, that conduit of hip-hop. Look at the rhythm of these words, and let me show you Shakespeare. It's the same thing. And you know, it's again a testament to the education system that does not understand the people they're trying to educate. And again, like I said, it's not being indigenous, it's the system in general. There's a reason why North America is starting to plummet in terms of how our children are being educated. There's a great film out there called Waiting for Superman. You should go check it out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Plugging other movies at the press conference. There's been a long history of collaboration between Indigenous artists and non-Indigenous artists when it comes to filmmaking. It stretches right back to the very beginnings of Indigenous cinema around the world. I'm wondering, say, for Peter, was there any trepidation into stepping into this story as a filmmaker?
Yeah, definitely. There's, you know, for better or for worse, I grew up in a sort of a very sort of liberal household, and social justice was really important to my mother. And I thought, I mean, aside from the fact that Jennifer got me at a kind of a vulnerable stage when I was editing Defender and I wasn't sure if it was going to be any good, I was just so excited to be offered a job, right? So I was like, yeah, I'll do that. But more importantly, the first thing that resonated with me with Shannon's script was these three girls, women. You know, I'd never seen that. I'd never seen them be the sort of heroines of their own movie kind of thing. And so I thought, the through line for me with Defender was there's a thread of social justice here for one, but there is also representation of character that we haven't really seen a whole lot of on film. And so that's kind of what drew me initially. I grew up with my best friend is like this Jamaican Yugoslavian guy, and when we were living together about 20 years ago, right out of high school. He kind of went through, he was doing cultural studies up at SFU, and he kind of went through a period of sort of like all white folk were bad, the enemy kind of phase. And our friendship at the time suffered from it. But I remember there was some real lessons from that period. And one of the lessons, you know, he kind of challenged me, and he sort of said, what are you gonna do to kind of improve the situation? And I, you know, that question kind of stuck with me for a long time, and I think, you know, I'm not really sure, I'm not sure-footed of my sort of place speaking on behalf of my characters, but I know that my characters are, and I knew that Jennifer was a steadying kind of voice. So I just tried to make a story that dealt with issues that I was interested in, which is see a story whereby the enemy is not in fact society, it's not in fact the white man, but it's more themselves. Sort of get beyond this kind of identity politics, because I sort of feel like we keep kind of revisiting that story without being an expert in films, native films, and but I know that that theme comes up a lot, and I just kind of wanted to tell a story about 3 amazing women who are informed by the issues that the sort of First Nations community is sort of dealing with in this country, but more they're just sort of dealing with their own personal issues, and they just sort of happen to be native. That's what I was interested in. And for those reasons, I think I took this on to kind of try to make a movie that maybe we haven't seen before.
Before I'll turn it over to questions of the audience in a minute. I just want to say it strikes me up here, in that you, Alanis, it was just more than 20 years ago, your film Ganasatake won the best Canadian feature prize at this very festival some 20-some years ago. In the past year, this organization has done a full retrospective of First Peoples cinema from around the world. We're now having this rather unprecedented media conference here today. It is an amazingly gratifying moment to see how far we've come, at least in this art form, in the 20 years since you won. Do any of you have, I know it was all difficult to make all of your movies, so I know it's not easy to make movies, but do you have a sense that there's just more openness to these stories, that these stories are now more free to be told and will be told?
Not really.
I think it's a very different time that we are in now, and I can say this is not so much about the film that is shown here that I made, but I can tell you that in my travels and what I've been watching and talking to young people, indigenous people from many different communities, where we're going is very different than where we've been. And the word that I cannot find to say is much higher than hope for our people and for what's happening to young people. I interviewed a lot of teenagers, young people. They're very young, 16, 15, 17. And the amazing thing is there's a movement that is going on now where these very young people talk like old people. They've been through drugs, some of them. They've been through trying to kill themselves. They've been through hell and back. And the way they speak is unbelievable, saying, I've been through this and I was sick. Now I walked from Great Whale to Ottawa, and I'm a new person, and I feel my ancestors talking through me. I'm strong. And all that darkness seems to be going away, and for a lot of them is gone. And you're going to see in the years to come a very different time for our people, and it's going to be great. And I feel it even now. It's more than an opening or we can go somewhere. You hear the people, they're going. It's not the government or any government who's going to tell them how to think or who they are. And when you get to a point that you find your identity, doesn't matter what people say, what you are, if you inside yourself know who you are, then that's the beginning of a great life. And that's what's happening right now, all over, even in the poorest place of our people. I see this and I hear it.
Questions? Bruce?
Good morning, afternoon, I guess. Bruce Kirkland from the Toronto Sun. Actually, this leads out of something that Alanis just said and also Jesse had asked earlier, and that's the collaboration, multicultural collaboration, and you see it on the panel here. But at the same time, I'm curious, how important is it also for First Nations people to own their own stories, even if they're going to collaborate on a multinational, multicultural level? So, because I know, Jennifer, you feel you own this story, and as you enabled it as a producer, so that intrigues me. And Jeff, after seeing The Colony, I think you own everything that you say in life. So, and that's, I'm saying that out of admiration. So I'd be curious to know what dynamic that is about owning these stories.
It's interesting that you use that word because, you know, I guess there is a sense of, you know, feeling like it's your child, like it's something you gave birth to. I definitely don't feel like, actually I gave birth twice since I took on this film, so it is very different, but take that back. I guess the sense of ownership, especially from an Indigenous perspective, I don't know that there's even a word for that. Is there? I don't think there is a word for ownership, because it's a very, you know, working with the environment, with the earth, with the natural world around you, you know, from a historical perspective, and the land and the water and all of those things. It's communal, it's shared, it's a relationship with, you know, something that is above you. And in many ways, I feel like that's how I approach storytelling as well, is I'm open to bringing a family around everything that I do. Number one, so that I don't have to experience the pressure of ownership. And number two, because I feel like the duty is way beyond me. Like this, what I do in my life, I didn't really make a conscious choice to do that. I think that I was asked on a spiritual level to do it. And the people I prayed for 2 years. You can ask Justine and Aaron who are here. I said, I promise you, we're gonna get a director. I promise you. 2 years I prayed with my own spirit. And Peter's face kept appearing to me. And that was the answer. I can't help that. So I think in many ways, the family, the communal group around the film and the collective ownership was decided on a very different level. And I think the experience sort of feels much more spiritual than, and he keeps wondering what the heck he's doing here. Like, you know, this is all much bigger than us, I feel. And I think we've done something very special, and it couldn't have happened without that collaboration.
Well, yeah, I mean, during the making of this film, I also felt like, you know, it had to be collaborative, right? The project didn't start with me. It absolutely was necessary for it to be collaborative. What I found interesting about the process is how when you make it, and I don't know if the fellow filmmakers up here feel this way, but when you're making a native film, how many people need it to be something that, you know, everyone has their own interpretation of what they need it to be. You know, like if you're dealing with like native folks, so many people weigh in on what they want it to be. And so and it's so interesting to me. I was like, oh, you need this film to do this for you. You know what I mean? And we got, you know, a lot of notes from, frankly, from non-native folks who were like, you know, it needs to be more native. You know, I thought that was really fascinating. You know, like, it's like everybody, like I was like, everybody had their own opinion about what this effing movie had to be. And it was like, so this kind of thing of ownership is very interesting. I also feel like, and why really, I prefer to be mute about the whole subject because it kind of like, it happens with a lot of input, particularly from Jennifer and my writer and my cast. Yeah, so in the end, you have to trust that, but it's just very fascinating. You know, you make a Native film, and there's a lot of pressure on it right away, it feels like, just because you're dealing with Native issues.
I don't feel like that at all. I mean, it's like I write, direct, edit, and score my films, and I have a tendency to work with the same people over and over. Like Glenn's third film, right? Third film you've been in mine. Third film that Glenn's been my cinematographer, and I have worked together. It's our third film.
I was your actor. not your cinematographer.
So it's the same people over and over again, and for me that that personalization, that ownership comes into writing. That to me is when I'm putting all of me into the piece, and I find by doing that, people get it right away. So there is no, are we on the same page? Because by virtue of that screenplay, we are literally on the same page. So they understand where I'm coming from, I understand where they're coming from, and I have a tendency to like to double up on things too. Like my cinematographer is also my cameraman, so that's one less person I have to deal with. And we understand each other on, you know, almost a kind of psychic level. We're sending psychic pictographs to each other during the whole thing, and we just understand each other, and there is no real dialogue there. Well, there is. That's I'm kind of exaggerating a bit. We, during pre-production, we talk about stuff. Like, if you come to my set after seeing one of my films, you'd think I'm really meticulous, but I'm not. We have a tendency to make stuff up when we get there. There's a few scenes that we have definitively planned out, but for the majority of it, like the acting scenes, I have a tendency anyway, to try to let the actors, all right, what do you guys want to do? And we'll react to how they do things, and we'll film it accordingly. So, you know, by the time the screenplay gets finished, I've already let go of the picture. It's not mine anymore, and we're here. I'm already in my brain writing the next piece. This is, to me, it's very, I'm not detached per se, but I'm looking at this like it's its own entity now. The film is its own entity, and it's going to behave however it's going to behave, and it's going to get reacted to, you know, things that are completely out of my control. So by the time it gets to the stage at Film Festival, you know, I'm, like I said, with it the whole time, writer, director, editor, scorer, I'm fucking sick of it. So I don't really want to, like, I don't want to have anything, you know, I'm kind of like, but we just finished it 2 weeks ago too. Like, I've been engrossed in this film for 3 years, and like Jennifer, I had a baby, and I moved from Arizona to Montreal during that time, and it's just been 100% chaos. So that film took on it's like its rhymes now. It's its own little entity. It could be in a room as a person. That's how much it's embodied a character for me. So I don't own that anymore. It's not mine. And by the time we get to editing, it was never mine. So we get a completely different animal from what I wrote, and by the time I finish cutting it, it's a completely animal from what we filmed. And then I throw the music on a movie, and it ends up being completely different, but the same from what we started. And I was talking about it a little bit in the previous press conference, that we take money 7 digits, and you're going to get a lot of opinions for that $7 or that 7-digit number. So you have to be, as a director, I mean, I like to think I rule with an iron fist, but really I don't. I'm a servant to the film, and I have to listen to everybody because I don't know everything. So by the time you get to filming and there's like 50, 60 people tugging on your sleeve. All right, what do we do here? What do we do there? I mean, eventually you start saying, use your fucking best judgment, man. Get out of my face. We need to kind of move on here. So you start deferring stuff to people that you've been working with this whole time. And it becomes a different animal. And you build trust with performances, you build trust with the craft work of everybody. And, you know, it represents all of us. Well, we were sitting in the color timing room, and Michel looked at me and he said, "This is my best work." And I didn't correct him and say, "Our best work." It's his picture. I mean, I told him what we wanted to do, but he's the one who executed it. And he'll sit there and probably, if he were here, I think he's gonna be here. If he were here, he'd probably sit there and say, you know, Bruno, my key grip, I mean, he's the guy that helped me. So you get so many people working on films, it's kind of hard to take ownership of them, even if they are about First Nations characters. But I think good films are ultimately universal. So the struggle that you see Ayla go through, the struggle you see the women in Empire of Dirt go through, et cetera, this is all universal. And I think this is a testament to good filmmaking, is that your ideas, your concepts, whatever, get across to an audience, and you know, you get to relate to them and connect on an intimate level, even though, you know, they're not really your ideas anymore. It's more, it becomes more abstract, and it deals with things on an emotional level, rather than, you know, this is a Jeff Barnaby production. It is a collaborative effort, and I am surrounded by great individuals who make me look a lot smarter and more talented than I actually am.
Yeah, I just had some thoughts on your, in regards to like owning our own stories as Aboriginal filmmakers, as Aboriginal film people, actors, whatever. I mean, traditionally, our communities, we had storytellers way back when. And then at some point, when film came around, our stories were dictated by non-native people, right? So we had Italians playing Indians. I'd love to play an Italian in a mob movie sometime, you know, if anybody's out there listening. I'll make you an offer you can't refuse. But I think, you know, now we have this wave of Aboriginal writers, Aboriginal storytellers, you know, and we do this collaborative effort. So I think, you know, as a means of owning our stories, it's not that we own them. It's we're given this role, like Jennifer said. There's a higher power out there that put us where we are today. It's not our choice. It hasn't been our choice to be here. I didn't, you know, a higher power chose for me to be an actor, because that's my role as an Indigenous person from my community. Is I'm a storyteller, and traditionally we had those roles in our societies, and nothing really has changed in that. These roles are just handed to you by a higher power, and these are the roads that are chosen for us, I think, as Aboriginal artists. We're storytellers, and that's our traditional role. You know?
Yeah, it's like when you go to a function and you ask people what they do, and you happen to bump into a Native person, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I want to be an actor," and usually you'd be like, "Oh, that's awesome," but for that, you're usually like, "Oh, that's unfortunate," you know, because it's a tough road. It's, you know, I think, you know, and I think Alanis is right in what she says about the future, but I still feel like we're kind of like banging on the walls in the margin, just, you know, even to just be heard. This panel, as you said, is unprecedented, and it's been a long time coming. So I'm pretty proud to be here.
I personally love that. I react to, like, if you want to motivate me, tell me I can't do something. If you want to motivate me, tell me I can't have it. And then that's, to me, it's, well, really, we'll see about that. Yeah. And that's, I think that's directly related to being a Native person, specifically from my family. But I think I love the marginalization. I love the roadblocks. And this is something that I've experienced right from the beginning. Like when we did The Colony, That did the round of funny rounds. Nobody wanted to do it because it's sex, it's violence, there's nudity. It's like, it's like res life. So nobody wanted to see that. And my idea from that point on, or even prior to that, was to be so good at what I do as a technical filmmaker that they can't ignore the content behind it. And that's kind of worked for me successfully up until this point. And I think it's not something that I consciously do. I don't try to put politics into my films. I think just by virtue of being native, they're already there. So I try to avoid that stuff. I try to kind of push back. I know anybody who's seen my films thinks that's absurd, right? But it's true. I don't try to do these things. I just think they happen to fall into place that way. I like being a storyteller. I didn't start telling native stories until I got into film. Prior to that, it was like science fiction and horror stuff. I mean, I'm a genre lover. I'm a fan of film. I'm a fan of artwork. I'm a fan of literature as much as anybody out there. My creativity stems from two places: the books I read, and the art I absorb, and the background that I come from. And I think that's true of any artist. And I think the craziness in my film stems directly from res life, and I think personally, I'd be a part of that craziness if I didn't have the obstacles in filmmaking to burn this energy off. I don't feel like I feel like a warrior, honestly. And if I wasn't doing this, I'd be in jail. I swear to God. That's probably true. My penchant for fighting and my penchant for being kind of an instigator and getting in people's shit, I think I'd be... I'd probably be...
We'd be cellmates.
Yeah, that's true. Funny story between you and I, between us. I was actually in jail for a while when we were doing the colony. So the color correction and all that, I wasn't even there for that. I was in holding somewhere. And that came about just by virtue of being native, because I was dating a crazy native girl, and I ended up getting tossed in jail, and that's something. It's res life, right? I mean, it's like
That's it.
It's like I'm gonna call the cops and get this guy dragged out of here, and that's something you see on a reserve a lot. And I was experiencing that in Montreal. Let me tell you, man, you can take the kid off the reserve, but you can't take the reserve out of the kid.
Well, that's also the story of independent film, though. Like it's very much like the myth of Sisyphus. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like regardless, it's rolling that boulder up to the top only to have it rolled down again. You know, it's like I feel like every single movie's like that. Particularly, and maybe there's another layer of sort of struggle with the types of stories we're trying to tell up here. But
and I personally don't think that has anything to do with being native or anything. You just have to be a specific kind of crazy to be a filmmaker. And I think, honestly, there's a lot of specific kind of crazy people on reserves that lends itself to being filmmakers. I mean, there's a huge contingent of native filmmakers coming up. And I think it's an inordinate amount compared to, say, non-native people. I think there's all kinds of people that want to be filmmakers, but I think a lot of native people take it personally because like our iconography has been peppered through films since the inception of film, right? So we've always associated with film, but never have been truly represented, and you're starting to see a shift in that. I think you're gonna start seeing a lot more like res tales, like not the sanitized for public consumption films that you've seen prior, but the kind of gritty, the kind of violent, and the kind of insane lifestyle that you can get in some of these communities. I'm not saying that's all it is, but it's definitely there. There's a definite reason why there's high suicide rates and recidivist rates and violence and all this stuff on reserves or just in native communities in general. I mean, there's a reason why it's there, and it's like you take a gladiator and you put him at a desk job. Eventually, that gladiator is going to take his word processor and smash it on somebody's head just by virtue of that energy not having an outlet. And for me, this is the healthiest way I can express that anger without being tossed in jail. I mean, that's the truth of it. And I think it's It's a cathartic experience to go into a theater and see the type of life you're living on screen represented realistically. And in that process, there's a glimmer of hope there. If only the idea that there's somebody listening, there's somebody watching, there's somebody paying attention. And what we're doing, I think, is undoing a century worth of misrepresentation. And nobody's gonna wanna be the Lone Ranger anymore. I mean, they're gonna wanna be the Glenn Gould. Maybe not Glenn, but you know, somebody. Glenn in my movies says, what have you done so far? You've gotten your skin taken off, you've gotten your leg chopped off, tossed in the jail.
Yeah, had the shit kicked out of me. Yeah, you beat me up pretty good in your movies, Jeff. I like it.
Well, this
I was shaving his head.
This may have been the first People's press conference at TIFF, but it will not be the last. And I want to thank you all for attending. I want to thank you all for bringing us such wonderful movies and for joining me today. Miigwech.